again, we are waiting now for provincial officials to start that news conference. It is going to get going in just a few moments. They're really going to talk about how unprecedented this has been, not only for British Columbia, but it's actually been unprecedented for much of Canada. And wildfire crews, this early in the season, it's only the beginning of June, they're already stretched very thin. So I imagine today they are going to touch on crews and how they are going to manage this if this continues into the rest of the summer, which, predictions are saying that it's going to. Let's go to that news conference now and wait for them to start, and then we'll come back for more analysis.
Please let me know when you guys sounds okay.
Can go up like another 20. Yeah, that's
okay. So right now they are just getting ready for that news conference to start. About 10 minutes late at this point. Let's talk a little bit about that wildfire near Port Alberni that is burning. So it's not actually the flames that are closing Highway 4. It's actually debris from the fire around that is landing on the highway, and that's forced the closure. Now, there is a detour route that's in place, but it involves logging roads, and that is not always easy when, people don't have the right type of vehicle and you have to travel on logging roads for hours and hours. But for some in that community, Port Alberni, also Tofino, Ucluelet, and some of the First Nation communities that are cut off, the logging road is the only way for them to get to their medical appointments, to get necessities. We're hoping to hear later from Claire Palmer, who will talk about the issue getting supplies actually into that western part of Vancouver Island. So we will hear from Claire then. Now, I'm going to just take a little break here. We're going to show you the news conference. It isn't starting yet, but we'll wait and watch together.
We'll hold off on starting. We can't do it. Minister can't hear us in the room. So, Hernani, is SW on a solution for that?
We are.
I can hear the Zoom. It's just very quiet. So the audio is coming through. It's just the volume isn't quite right.
Okay, I'm checking.
Anybody have a tree?
Okay, so as you can see, they are having technical issues, not on our end actually, but on the side of the provincial government. So they aren't quite ready to get this news conference started. But we do have Dr. Laurie Daniels standing by with UBC, who is an expert on all things wildfires. Laurie Daniels, it's hard to predict from year to year, but can you tell us why we're so convinced that the rest of this summer is going to be so bad?
Yeah, that's a great question, Anita. And we don't know with certainty yet. Let's all hope for more rain between now and the end of June so that we can be bringing the fire danger down. I was just looking at the fire danger map for British Columbia. Almost, 2/3 to 3/4 of the province are in high to extreme. And it's only the first week in June. That means that we've had very little rain, and these very warm temperatures that we've been enjoying are also drying out the forests and the vegetation around us. And as that warm, dry conditions kind of ramp up, it dries out the forests and makes it easier for any ignition, lightning or human, to cause a fire that would spread, get out of control, and have major impacts. And of course, we're already seeing that in the northeast of the province, where we've had very large fires start almost a month ago now. And we now have a fire that is approaching, the second largest fire ever on record, and a very large area burned up in the northeast of the province with huge consequences to citizens, to ecosystems. And again, we've seen that also all across our nation, where drought and high temperatures are driving the conditions for these fires.
Can you remember a time when the fire season started this early and like you talked about how the forests are getting so dry? Is there a time that we can remember when that's been the case?
Well, I'm at a conference right now, BC Community Forest Association conference. We're talking about wildfire mitigation. And one of the things many people have been saying to me in the last couple of days is this feels like 2017. Remember back to 2017 when the temperatures began to creep up in early June and it got very warm and very hot by the end of June. Fire danger ramped up very quickly in the southern half of the province, as we're experiencing right now. And we did not get the rain that we were hoping for in June of 2017. We got many wildfires that started at the beginning of July. Recall that was the summer when we burned 1.2 million hectares, a large part of it in central and southern British Columbia. So this, I think, for me, tells me that we're in conditions right now around so much of the province in early spring that this is why we are concerned. If we do not get the rain that we are hoping for and fire danger continues to accumulate, we will have conditions all across the province. We already have conditions all across the province that are very conducive to fire. This is our moment for homeowners all over this province to take on those fire smart principles and to think about the ways to defend your home, to make sure that if fire were to start near your community and sparks were to be carried in the wind into your yard and onto your house, that your house is already defended. Getting the leaves out of the gutters for that accumulated last winter and this spring, cleaning up our yards to make sure burnable debris are away from the house, making sure that we don't have firewood or other flammable materials stacked right against the house, a little bit of landscaping this weekend in this nice weather. And anybody who's out in the woods enjoying beautiful British Columbia, camping, using recreational vehicles, we need to be really, really vigilant that we are not starting a wildfire. These are the times and the conditions under which those mistakes can happen with huge consequence.
Yeah, and we know already this year that it's about 50-50 in terms of the cause of fire in BC. So 50% natural causes, 50% human causes. And it's interesting because, I think we often think that, somebody's throwing a cigarette out the window and that's the reason for the human caused fire. But what we've learned is that it actually happens, one of the primary causes is a train, a car heating up and catching on fire, those types of things. So they're not always the simplest things that you're thinking of every day. And so we really do need to be vigilant, like you're saying. How much rain is needed to actually make a difference?
So to make enough of a difference that we need quite a bit of rain. We need a good, steady rainfall for a few hours that really allow the water to saturate into the ground to really bring down the fire danger. It helps when temperatures are down and humidity comes up and we get a sprinkle of rain. That will dampen things down. But it only takes a few hours or a couple of warm days right after that sprinkling of rain for the fuels to dry out again and for the fire danger to be back up to where it was pre-rain. So we really need those saturating rains, those ones that give us, multiple days of fairly steady rain, not just the drizzle, or a good downpour to really, really saturate the ground, benefit the plants and trees in our gardens and in the forest, and really bring that fire danger down. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that in the short-term predictions for many parts of the province. Anywhere where you're getting predictions for rain in the next few days, please be happy with that and let's hope that it comes true. We've seen, though, the long-range forecasts have been predicting rain, and then we're not really seeing the kind of rain that we're needing at this time of year. And normally June is a fairly wet part of the year for us. It's, kind of the January where we get those saturating rains. We're just not experiencing them quite yet. So let's keep our fingers crossed. I know that seems counterintuitive to so many people, but let's keep our fingers crossed for some of that rain to get the fire danger back under control.
Dr. Daniels, since we started this interview, I can sort of feel it in your voice, the stress, the worry. Can you tell me a little bit about that as somebody who studies wildfires so closely?
Well, it concerns me when I see our maps, our fire danger maps, showing all over the province this level of concern so early in the year. We know it's going to get warmer and drier through the summer. July and August is our hottest time of the year, and especially in the southern part of the province, that's when fires are more common in the southern 2/3 of the province. So it's really going to get worse before it gets better this year. So that vigilance is really, really important. Hoping for a bit of rain. It's all we can do right now is hope. And then also to be prepared, that defensible space around our homes becomes important. It does concern me too. I've heard from many community members. I've worked in lots of communities around British Columbia, and we hear these comments where we've had fire into a community and people have said, oh, we've had our once in a lifetime. I don't need to worry any longer. And I want to correct that myth. You know, we have seen, you know, in 2003 and then again in 2004, fires in and around the city of Kelowna. Sadly, we had the tragic fire in Lytton in 2021, and then fires again in 2022 that burned and impacted homes. People lost homes in the suburbs or on the edge of the town of Lytton again in 2022, back-to-back years. And so these are not once in a lifetime or one-off events. And quite frankly, for most of British Columbia, including the Lower Mainland, where we have fires burning both in the Lower Mainland and on Vancouver Island in our coastal forests, you know, all of these ecosystems are highly susceptible to fire when it is hot and dry like this. So it's not if, it's when for the majority of communities in British Columbia. And so really having people understand that we live in a fire-prone environment. It's beautiful, but there's a lot of fuel out there in our forests. And so thinking about ways that we can be prepared as individuals, but also supporting our communities and new and innovative ways for us to be managing our forests across our province to make it more resilient to climate change is really, really important. I have a little irony for you. Part of our problem in British Columbia, part of the reason we're experiencing such large and widespread and impactful fires is because for many decades we've been so successful at putting fires out. In doing so, we have allowed forests over large areas to mature and become very uniform. And inside those mature forests, they can be very dense with many, many trees, but also dying trees, debris that's accumulating branches, and dead material down on the ground that's kind of the kindling for a fire. So in many of our forests, they're overstocked with fuels, so it's accumulated in absence of any fire, and the landscapes are very homogeneous. So when a fire starts now, it can rapidly begin to spread. There's all that extra fuel to give it extra energy to make it more intense, builds energy under windy conditions, spreads very rapidly, and as we're experiencing, makes it exceptionally difficult to control and to suppress. So these fires that we are experiencing in the last few years are exceeding all of our modern technologies, our ability to detect and suppress those fires and put them under control. This is not limited to BC, and this is not meant to be a criticism of our wildland firefighters. We have world-class firefighters who are out there doing an amazing job up in Northeast BC and other places in the province right now. But globally, we're just finding that fires burning under these hot, dry, record-breaking conditions are more intense and are exceeding all of the technology that we can throw at them. And it's a global pattern that we're seeing. So it leads us to think, how can we make our communities and our forests more resilient to fire? And so we're here at this conference, the Community Forest Association conference, and many other meetings and conferences in BC in the last couple of years have been talking about how do we transform forest management and to begin to change the way we manage our forests in BC so they become resilient to fire. How do we change landscape patterns to make the forest more heterogeneous? To add broadleaf trees back into the mix of forests, to actively encourage broadleaf trees like aspens and birches to grow back as part of the mix because they burn in a different way than our needleleaf trees. They create fire fences and fire breaks in the landscape that help to change fire behavior and make it create opportunities for wildland firefighters to get fires under control when they are large and rapidly spreading across the landscape.
Well, and Dr. Daniels, it's very important work that you and your colleagues are doing in looking at that and how you change that landscape. But how quickly does that need to be done? Because it feels like time is running out.
Well, we need to be acting more quickly than we are today. I'm very encouraged to be at a meeting like this, again, with community forests and meeting with municipalities and Indigenous communities over the last week. I've been here in the interior BC doing planning with communities who are actively being proactive in their management of the forests around them. They are designing and implementing fuels treatments. That means they're looking at the forests immediately around their community and saying, where are there literally too many trees? Where are the trees so dense that we could reduce the number of them, leaving the big trees, the wildlife trees, the big valuable trees that create shade and protection, but remove the smaller trees that are underneath, acting as a ladder, connecting the surface fuels, all that dead and burnable debris on the ground that could catch fire and then move to a small tree and then a medium-sized tree and up into the canopy trees. We want to get rid of the medium and small trees and that burnable debris on the ground and just leave the big trees behind. And that helps create that defensible space. It reduces fuels and it reduces the fuel loads so that if a fire is burning towards a community, it goes from being a crown fire spreading treetop to treetop with fewer trees nearby. It runs out of energy and drops to the ground where wildland firefighters can put it out before it makes it into a neighborhood to burn homes. So that proactive management of forests immediately surrounding our communities is a place we can target and act very, very efficiently. Now, this is going to sound ironic as well, but adding fire back into the landscape in cool, wetter years, managed wildfires to get that diversity and heterogeneity back in the landscape, to give opportunities for the broadleaf forest to grow back, and also to use prescribed burns where it's appropriate, and again, under cooler and wetter conditions to reduce those fuel loads, to reinvigorate understory plants and ecosystem processes where fire has been removed from those ecosystems is a critical component of our next steps in terms of fire and forest management that's very innovative and will be part of the solution into the future.
And I want to talk about those prescribed burns a little bit more because, yes, BC Wildfire Service does do that, but there are a lot of Indigenous communities that, have been doing that for years, but say that the province isn't using them enough to help do these prescribed burns going forward to make sure that we don't have big wildfires breaking out. What say you? Should the province be doing more in terms of using these communities to help?
Absolutely. We have been told time and time again, and we're beginning to really understand the message from our Indigenous collaborators, from Indigenous knowledge holders, fire keepers, that in fact, fire was an essential part of many of the ecosystems in British Columbia, that Indigenous people took care of their territories. They used fire to cleanse the land, to cultivate plants, to revitalize food plants, medicinal plants, plants that were used for spiritual ceremonies, ceremony in general. That use of fire in order to maintain the land and to support lives and livelihoods historically was key in the way that our ecosystems functioned. Indigenous knowledge and leadership by Indigenous fire keepers in collaboration with Western scientists and BC Wildfire Service is the direction that we need to be going. In fact, that was one of the topics we talked about just this morning at the conference here, the BC Community Forest Association conference. We had a panel of Indigenous fire knowledge holders who have been doing exactly that, revitalizing Indigenous fire culture and cultural burning on their traditional territories with teams like mine at UBC and other universities working in collaboration with them so we can learn from them, so we can understand how those cultural fires, we call them good fire, fires that burn under cooler and damper conditions, that burn as low intensity, but stimulate the plants, revitalize nutrients into the soil, replenish our forests, maintain healthy, resilient forest structures. The Indigenous cultural burns are a key component of this new paradigm in forest management to manage for resilience and to try to revitalize the resistance and resilience of our forests to both drought, insects, disease, fire, and all of their interactions. And in truth, all of these things have been interacting and contributing to the changes we've seen in our forests in British Columbia over the last decade. Last 2 decades. Think back to mountain pine beetle, a climate-triggered insect outbreak that affected 16 million hectares of forests in British Columbia. Many of those forests have been affected by fires since that insect outbreak. Dead trees in the forest or the residual wood left behind after we salvage logged those stands and left wood on the ground fed some of the fires that we have experienced in the big fire years, the 2009s and 10s in the Caribou, 2015, 2017, 2018, again province-wide, and then again 2021. Only 2 years ago, we were having an extreme fire season. And here we are again, 2023, just 2 years later, with high to extreme fire danger over so much of our province.
Dr. Lori Daniels, I have to commend you. You are the expert in wildfire, and you have been teaching us a lot right now. We are currently, if you're just joining us, we are live, and we are about to go to this news conference with the provincial government. It is just starting now, so I'm going to take you there.
And
they're talking about the fire season to come.
Today, we will be providing information on wildfire preparedness and the wildfire season outlook. I'm pleased to be joined by Bruce Ralston, Minister of Forests, responsible for the BC Wildfire Service, Matt McDonald, Lead Fire Weather Forecaster with the BC Wildfire Service, and Neil McLaughlin, Superintendent of Predictive Services with the BC Wildfire Service. We also have several other folks on the line to help answer questions that you may have. This week, Canadians right across the country have been impacted by wildfire and smoke from wildfires. With heightened temperatures this week and with summer on our doorstep, British Columbians are understandably wondering what the summer will be like in terms of wildfire. This wildfire season in British Columbia is already well underway and has been since mid-April. There are currently 82 wildfires burning across the province, and since April 1st, 2023, 382 wildfires have burned a total of 520,520 hectares. Already, the number of hectares burned this season exceeds the total number of hectares burned in 16 of the last 20 wildfire seasons. 99% of this fire activity so far has been within the Prince George Fire Centre, which includes central and northeastern BC. More than 1,000 personnel have been directly engaged in wildfire response efforts in the North Peace over the last month. Significant fires are also being responded to in the coastal region of the province. I know that this is a concerning time for people who are impacted by the Highway 4 closure due to the Cameron Bluff wildfire. Please know that this closure is temporary. A detour is in place, but it should also only be used for emergencies. We continue to ensure that people have the essentials that they need. Trucks are making it through the detour route. There is no need to stock up on essential supplies. We are asking people to stay calm and purchase only what you need so that everyone in your communities can access the supplies that they require. Let's continue to look out for each other. I would like to thank the dedicated and professional and expert staff members from the BC Wildfire Service for all of their work to date and for their work to come this season. As well, I want to acknowledge the local fire departments that often consist of volunteers for their work in assisting to responding to wildfires. I would also like to thank communities and volunteers in evacuation centers who have supported their neighbors by administering BC's emergency support services. As a reminder, as of noon today, campfires are prohibited in most regions of the province. Open burning fires also remain prohibited across the entire province. Please check prohibitions in your region before lighting a fire of any kind. You can find this information on the BC Wildfire Service website or mobile app. As we move further into the wildfire season, I encourage and urge people to stay informed and to be prepared. While our government is making sure supports and resources are in place for the upcoming wildfire season, it's equally important that people start putting together a plan. Now is the time to understand the hazards that you face in the regions that you live in and to prepare yourselves, your family, your home, and community for any potential fires. We need people to follow all fire bans and avoid activity that may result in a wildfire. Whether you live near an active wildfire or not, I encourage every British Columbian to take 20 minutes out of your day to put together an emergency plan, including packing a grab-and-go emergency kit so that you are prepared to leave immediately if you are required to evacuate. Your grab-and-go bag should include important documents, such as identification and insurance papers, and I encourage everyone to review their insurance policy for fire damage. In 2021, during the global pandemic, large-scale wildfire evacuations occurred during a time of public health restrictions, coupled with high vacancy rates in hotels across the province. Now, we have seen a significant resumption of travel and tourism, which means that hotels are not as widely available as they were in 2021. As a result, accommodation may look different in the event of significant evacuations, with greater emphasis on group lodging at community centers and on billeting. My ministry continues to work closely with First Nations, local authorities, and other partners to identify communities and venues that can support evacuees in the event of a large-scale evacuation. This advanced planning will help keep evacuees safe and as close to their homes as possible. In the event that you are evacuated, you may find it more suitable for you and your immediate family to stay with family and friends in a community that is safe from wildfires. It is worth making those connections now and having those conversations with family and friends in other areas of the province early. I want to reassure you that if you choose to stay with family and friends, you will still be eligible for emergency support services if you require assistance, to help with costs related to billeting, food, and incidentals. I want to emphasize that the province, First Nations, and local authorities will be there to assist all families or individuals who need accommodation or assistance. Last year, our government provided British Columbians with one more tool to support them in preparing for a wildfire or other disaster. We made it possible for people to pre-register with emergency support services online using the evacuee registration and assistance tool. Pre-registration means that evacuees don't need to spend time signing up while they are in an emergency. So individuals and families can pre-register now at ess.gov.bc.ca. That's ess.gov.bc.ca. During emergencies, the province amplifies all evacuation alerts and orders issued by local communities on Emergency Info BC and Emergency Info BC's Twitter account. The BC Wildfire Service website, social media channels, and the BC Wildfire Service mobile app, which is available for Apple and Android devices, provides the location and details of all active wildfires in BC. This BC Wildfire Service app is also where you can report a wildfire. During an emergency, these platforms also share advice and resources to help people and communities stay safe. The province may also issue broadcast intrusive alerts for evacuations on behalf of communities. It is important that British Columbians are aware of these sources of information before an emergency takes place. We are seeing the impacts of climate change all around us. Climate-related emergencies are increasing. Just last month, we were dealing with flooding in parts of the province. Disaster financial assistance is available for eligible British Columbians in southeast and central areas of the province who were affected by flooding between April 27th and May 16th this year. We have also seen that heat events are becoming more frequent and projected to become more severe due to climate change. Heat is now a part of our reality, and it is critical that British Columbians understand what they can do to protect themselves and their loved ones if these events happen. Our government has worked to improve public education, communication, and services during heat events. This includes launching the BC Heat Alert and Response System, providing funding for local governments to proactively open cooling centers and provide transportation for vulnerable people, supporting First Nations and local authorities by introducing a new extreme heat funding stream under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, and releasing the Prepared BC Extreme Heat Preparedness Guide so individuals and families can take steps to prepare. During periods of hot weather, make sure you stay hydrated, find cool or shady locations, and check in on vulnerable family members and friends. I understand that heading into a potentially hazardous wildfire season can be unsettling for people, but I want to assure British Columbians that we are working hard to ensure communities are prepared and have the supports that they need in the event of a wildfire or other climate-related emergency. We urge individuals and families to take the necessary steps to prepare. By taking steps to be prepared and knowing where to find information, we can all gain a sense of control, sense of safety, and peace of mind. Be calm, be alert, be prepared this wildfire season. Let's enjoy the summer, but let's do it safely. And with that, I will pass it on to Minister Bruce Ralston, Minister of Forests.
Very much. Let me begin by recognizing the First Nations and the territory of Gavin. I'm grateful to be speaking to you from the territory of the Little Mountain Nation, Swan. As Mr. Ma has said, there are 82 wildfires burning across British Columbia. We've seen major fires and impacts this spring. And let me begin by acknowledging all the people that have been impacted by fire and by smoke. It's extremely difficult living day to day with smoke or near a fire, knowing that night is actually or working. I want to express my sincere thanks to the firefighters, first responders, emergency management teams, highway crews, and communities who are working tirelessly to keep people safe. The BC Wildfire Service is working around the clock to suppress fires, reduce impacts on communities, and share up-to-date information with the public. Several factors have combined to raise concerns about the current fire season. We had a very dry spring across the province. It was the hottest May on record, resulting in rapid snowmelt. The risk of flooding has gone down, but the prospect of drought is very high. As always, our experts, who you will hear from shortly, are able to track climate conditions against the buildup of drying and dead material on the forest floor and forecast areas of specific concern for potential wildfires. These conditions, if they persist, can impact how
You are watching live the provincial government to give their update on the situation with wildfires in this province. Unfortunately, the audio is not great here with Minister Bruce Ralston, so we are going to duck out of this news conference now. But we will have a full story on our website later this afternoon detailing everything Bowinn Ma talked about and everything that Minister Ralston here has chatted about and anything that you have missed. So thank you so much for joining us live today in this news conference. Again, we apologize for the technical difficulties.